Hello, I am Taylor Williams, and today we will be talking about DNA evidence. DNA evidence is anything left at a crime scene that could connect you to the crime, such as hair fibers, blood, bodily fluids, anything of that sort. Many people get caught due to DNA evidence not realizing that they have left something that is valuable use at the crime scene. Many will ask, what exactly is DNA? DNA is the hereditary material in humans and also almost all other organisms. Nearly every cell in a person's body has the same DNA. Most DNA is located in the nucleus, but a small amount of DNA is located in the mitochondria. What is the mitochondria? The mitochondria are structures within cells that convert the energy from food into a form that the cells can use. I know that may sound complicated, and you're probably wondering, well, how do you even gather things that are in, how do you gather that? Well, in order to gather DNA, many people use physical evidence. Physical evidence is any tangible item that can connect an offender to a crime scene, such as hair. Biological evidence, which contains DNA, is a type of physical evidence as well. However, biological evidence is not always visible to the naked eye. DNA testing has expanded the types of use for biological evidence. All biological evidence found at crime scenes can be subjected to DNA testing. Samples such as feces and vomit can be tested, but may not be routinely accepted by laboratories for testing. It depends on your city's police department whether or not they accept it. As you can see, many don't accept vomit as a way to connect you to a crime. Identifying DNA. Since only a few cells can be significant to obtain useful DNA information to your case, the possible locations of DNA on the evidence and the biological source contains the cell. Remember that just because you cannot see a stain does not mean there are not enough cells for DNA testing. DNA does more than just identify the source of the sample. It can place a known individual at a crime scene, in a home, or in a room where the suspect claimed not to have been. It can refuse a claim of self-defense and put a weapon in the suspect's hand. It can change a story from an alibi to one of consent. The more officers know how to use DNA, the more powerful of a tool it can be. Crime scene integrity. Protection of the crime scene is essential to the protection of evidence. Safeguarding and persevering evidence is a fundamental to the successful solution of a crime. Remember, while documenting evidence at the crime scene, to include descriptions of whether evidence has been found wet or dry. An example of this documentation would include blood spatters. Contamination. The risk of contamination at any crime scene can be reduced by limiting individual activity. Do not allow everyone in your crime scene. Many crime scenes only allow important people in, and that's only about 4, because they do not want all the cross-contamination. They do not want all the bodily fluids from other police officers dirtying up the scene, destroying evidence, contaminating evidence. It is important for all law enforcement personnel at the crime scene to make a conscious effort to refrain from smoking, eating, drinking, littering, or any other actions which could be compromising the scene. Because DNA evidence is more sensitive than other types of evidence, law enforcement personnel should be especially aware of their actions at the scene to prevent inadvertent contamination of evidence. The chain of custody. The chain of custody of evidence is a record of individuals who had physical possession of the evidence. Documentation is critical to containing the integrity of the chain of custody. Everyone that comes across the evidence, any DNA, blood samples, anything, must sign a contamination log and verify that they have had it. So if their DNA is found in any of the evidence, they're covered because by the chain of custody, telling them who had dealings with the evidence. In processing the evidence, the fewer people handling the evidence, the better. There is a less chance of contamination and a shorter chain of custody for court admissible hearing. The way to transport and how to store. The first responding officer may be called upon to transport evidence from a crime scene. As with any evidence, the officer should ensure the chain of custody is maintained. In addition, they should be aware of the direct sunlight and warmer conditions may degrade DNA. and avoid storing evidence in places that may get too hot, such as the trunk of the police car, to best preserve DNA evidence stored in a cold environment. Any probative biological sample that has been stored dry or frozen, regardless of age, may be considered for DNA analysis. Nuclear DNA from blood and semen stains more than 20 years old have been analyzed successfully using polymerase chain reaction, better known as PCR. Samples that may have been stored wet for an extended period of time should be considered for testing only PCR and may be unsuitable for DNA analysis. Mitochondrial DNA analysis has been performed on very old bones, teeth, and hair samples, but that is not the most recommended type of DNA. Teeth samples have messed up a lot of things. Michael Jordan's dad died, and they used teeth sampling to try to discover who he was, and they got it completely wrong. So that is the least reliable form of DNA. Samples generally considered unsuitable for testing with current techniques include embalmed bodies, with the possible exception of bone or plucked hairs, pathology or fetal tissue samples that have been immersed in are formal for more than a few hours, and urine stains. Other samples such as feces, fecal stains, and vomit can potentially be tested but are not routinely accepted. Thank you for listening to my informative presentation about DNA testing. DNA testing has helped the crime department by a long shot, but it has also hurt the crime department. Relying solely on DNA testing, in my opinion, isn't the best, but many use it and has been helpful for many different cases that many didn't think will be solved. Thank you.